I never thought a Tuesday morning would change everything. My name is Marcus Chen, and I've been working as a junior systems analyst at Meridian Tech for exactly 8 months and 12 days. Not that I'm counting or anything, but when you're drowning in student loans and living in a studio apartment that's basically a glorified closet, every day matters. That morning started like any other. I grabbed my usual gas station coffee, the kind that tastes like liquid regret, and settled into my cramped cubicle on the 3rd floor. The fluorescent lights hummed their familiar tune of corporate despair, and I was ready for another day of fixing minor glitches and pretending my computer science degree was being put to good use. But at 9:47 a.m., everything went sideways. The first sign of trouble came from Sarah in accounting. Her panicked voice cut through the usual office chatter. The entire payment system is down. We can't process any transactions. Within minutes, the domino effect began. Customer service phones started ringing off the hook. The sales team went into crisis mode. And somewhere in the executive tower above us, I could practically feel the blood pressure rising. See, what most people don't understand about Meridian Tech is that we're not just another software company. We process payments for over 3,000 small businesses across the country. When our system goes down, it doesn't just affect us. It affects mom-and-pop shops, restaurants, service providers, all the little businesses that depend on us to keep their cash flow moving. And cash flow, as any business owner will tell you, is oxygen. I watched my co-workers scramble. The senior developers huddled around their monitors like surgeons around an operating table. The IT director, Mr. Patterson, was making calls to every vendor and consultant he could think of. The air grew thick with tension and the smell of stress sweat. That's when I heard the number that made my stomach drop. $400,000. Janet from finance was on the phone with someone from upper management, and her voice carried across the floor. If we can't get this fixed in the next few hours, we're looking at potential losses of $400,000. Maybe more. She paused, listening. Yes, sir. I understand. The client contracts have penalty clauses for extended downtime. $400,000. That number bounced around in my head like a pinball. To put that in perspective, that was more money than I'd probably see in the next 5 years combined. It was the kind of money that could crush a company, especially with all the penalties and reputation damage that would follow. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was, struggling to pay my $400 rent each month, while a system glitch was about to cost the company 1,000 times that amount. But instead of feeling overwhelmed by the magnitude of it all, something strange happened. My mind started working differently. All those late nights studying algorithms, all those projects I'd done just for fun, all those times I dug deep into code just because I was curious, it all started connecting. While everyone else was panicking, I found myself getting calmer. I pulled up the system architecture diagrams I'd been studying during my lunch breaks. Yes, you heard that right. I spent my lunch breaks learning about systems I wasn't even supposed to work on. Call it curiosity, call it ambition, or call it the desperate need to feel like I was actually using my education for something meaningful. The payment system was a complex beast, with multiple servers, databases, and API connections all talking to each other in a delicate dance. Most of the senior guys were looking at the obvious places: the main servers, the primary databases, the network connections. But I had a different theory. 3 weeks earlier, I'd noticed something odd in the system logs during a routine maintenance check. It wasn't my job to look at those logs, but I'd been curious about a pattern I'd spotted. There was a small memory leak in one of the secondary authentication services. Nothing dramatic, just a tiny drip that would build up pressure over time. I'd made a note about it in my personal files, thinking I might mention it to someone eventually. Eventually had just become now. As I pulled up my notes, my hands were steady despite the chaos around me. I could hear Mr. Patterson on the phone with our CEO, explaining that the external consultants wouldn't be available for at least 3 hours. 3 hours we didn't have. That's when I made a decision that would change everything. I stood up from my cubicle, walked over to Patterson's office, and knocked on the doorframe. "Sir," I said, my voice somehow steadier than I felt, "I think I might know what's wrong." The look on Mr. Patterson's face when I interrupted his crisis call was something between confusion and irritation. Here was this junior analyst, me, the guy who usually just fixed printer connections and helped people reset their passwords, claiming to have insights into a system failure that had stumped our entire senior development team. "Marcus, I appreciate your enthusiasm, but we've got the best people working on this," he said, his hand partially covering the phone. "Maybe you could help coordinate with customer service or the secondary authentication service," I interrupted, knowing I had about 10 seconds to make my case before he dismissed me entirely. "There's a memory leak in the OAuth token validation module. It's been building pressure for weeks, and this morning it finally caused a cascade failure." Patterson's expression changed. He held up a finger to whoever was on the phone and gave me his full attention. "What are you talking about?" I pulled out my phone and showed him the screenshots I'd taken 3 weeks ago, the memory usage patterns, the gradual degradation in response times, the error logs that everyone else had dismissed as routine noise. "I noticed this during the maintenance cycle on the 15th. The leak is small, but it compounds over time. When it reached critical mass this morning, it didn't just crash the authentication service, it triggered a safety protocol that shut down the entire payment processing pipeline." The room went quiet. Even the person on the other end of Patterson's phone seemed to be listening. "You've been monitoring systems outside your clearance level?" His voice had an edge to it. This was the moment of truth. I could have backed down, apologized, made some excuse about accidentally stumbling across the data. Instead, I doubled down. "Sir, I've been studying our entire infrastructure during my free time. I know it's not technically my job, but I want to understand how everything fits together. And right now, I'm pretty sure I can fix this." Patterson stared at me for what felt like an eternity. Behind him, through his office window, I could see the chaos continuing on the main floor. Phones ringing, people running between cubicles, the kind of controlled panic that happens when millions of dollars hang in the balance. "How long?" he asked. 20 minutes. Maybe less." He looked at his watch, then at his computer screen showing the mounting losses in real time. "Johnson," he said into the phone, "I'm going to call you back. We might have something." He hung up and turned back to me. "You've got 15 minutes. If you're wrong, if you make things worse, if you—" "I understand, sir." "Thompson," he called out to one of the senior developers. "Give Marcus whatever access he needs. And watch everything he does." What followed was the most intense 15 minutes of my professional life. With Thompson looking over my shoulder like a suspicious parent, I dove into the authentication services code. The memory leak was exactly where I thought it would be, in a function that was supposed to clean up expired tokens but had a small flaw in its garbage collection routine. The fix itself was elegant in its simplicity. 3 lines of code. 3 lines that corrected a logic error that had been slowly poisoning the system for weeks. But finding those 3 lines required understanding not just the code, but how it interacted with 17 other services across our entire platform. "That's it?" Thompson asked, incredulous, as I pushed the changes to the staging server. "That's it. The authentication service should restart cleanly now, and once it's back online, the payment system will automatically reconnect." We watched the monitors together. System status indicators started turning green one by one, like Christmas lights coming to life. First authentication, then payment processing, then the customer-facing APIs. The whole resurrection took exactly 6 minutes and 37 seconds. The silence on the floor was deafening. Then someone in accounting shouted, "Transactions are processing," and the entire 3rd floor erupted in cheers. Patterson walked out of his office, his face unreadable. He looked at the green lights on the main status board, then at me, then back at the board. "How did you know?" "I pay attention," I said, trying to keep the tremor out of my voice. "And I really didn't want to see the company lose $400,000. He nodded slowly. "Thompson, what's the total downtime going to be?" 43 minutes, sir. Well within our service level agreements. "And the potential losses?" "Minimal." Maybe a few $100s in penalties, nothing catastrophic. Patterson looked at me again, and this time there was something different in his expression. Respect, maybe. Or just the relief of a man who'd just watched his career get pulled back from the brink. Marcus, I think you and I need to have a conversation with someone upstairs. I felt my heart skip a beat. Upstairs meant the executive floor. The place where decisions got made and careers got launched or destroyed. I'd never been upstairs. Hell, I wasn't even sure my keycard would work in the elevator to get there. What kind of conversation? I managed to ask. Patterson smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen from him all morning. The kind that changes everything. The elevator ride to the 15th floor felt like ascending into another dimension. I'd worked in this building for 8 months, but I might as well have been visiting an alien planet. The carpet up here was thick enough to lose loose change in, the walls were lined with real wood paneling instead of industrial beige paint, and everything smelled like expensive leather and success. Patterson led me down a hallway lined with portraits of company founders and achievement awards, past offices with glass walls that offered glimpses of views I didn't even know existed from our building. We stopped at a conference room where a woman in an immaculate navy suit was pacing while talking rapidly on her phone. "Rebecca," Patterson said as we entered. "This is Marcus Chen. Rebecca Alvarez, Senior Vice President of Operations." I'd seen her picture in company newsletters but never imagined I'd meet her in person. She was younger than I'd expected, maybe early 30s, with a kind of focused energy that suggested she could run through walls if they got in her way. She ended her call and looked me up and down. "You're the one who fixed the authentication service?" "Yes, ma'am." "Don't ma'am me, I'm probably only 5 years older than you." She gestured for us to sit. "Walk me through it. Everything." For the next 10 minutes, I explained the memory leak, the cascade failure, and the fix. Rebecca listened without interrupting, asking pointed questions that made it clear she understood the technical details better than I'd expected from an executive. "So you've been studying our entire infrastructure on your own time," she said when I finished. "Yes." "Why?" It was such a simple question, but I realized no one had ever asked me that before. Why had I spent my evenings and weekends diving into system documentation? Why did I care about code I wasn't paid to maintain? "Because I want to be excellent at this," I said finally. "Not just competent, not just good enough to keep my job, but truly excellent. And you can't be excellent at software development if you only understand your little corner of the system." Rebecca exchanged a look with Patterson. "What's your current salary, Marcus?" The question caught me off guard. $52,000. "And you've been here 8 months. 8 months and 12 days. She laughed. "You're counting days. That's either dedication or desperation." "Maybe both." "Fair enough." She stood up and walked to the window, looking out over the city. "Marcus, what I'm about to tell you doesn't leave this room until we make an official announcement." "Understood." I nodded, though she couldn't see me. "We're launching a new division. Advanced Systems Architecture. It's going to be responsible for designing and maintaining the next generation of our platform, the infrastructure that'll handle 10 times our current transaction volume." She turned back to face me. "I need someone to head up the technical side. Someone who understands our current systems inside and out, but who also has the vision to build something completely new." My brain struggled to process what she was saying. "You mean like a senior developer position?" "I mean like a chief technology architect position." The words hit me like a physical force. CTO-level positions were the kinds of jobs I dreamed about having someday, maybe after 10 or 15 years of climbing the corporate ladder. They weren't supposed to be offered to junior analysts who still ate ramen for dinner 3 nights a week. "I don't understand," I said. "What don't you understand?" "I've been here 8 months. I'm nobody. There are dozens of people more qualified." "Are there?" Rebecca interrupted. "Because when our entire payment system went down this morning, those dozens of more qualified people were stumped. You weren't." When we were looking at a $400,000 crisis, you solved it in minutes. That tells me something about how you think, how you see problems. She sat back down across from me. Marcus, I've been in this industry for 12 years. I've seen a lot of smart people, a lot of experienced people, a lot of credentialed people. But the ones who make the real difference, the ones who build the future instead of just maintaining the present, they have something different. They see patterns others miss. They understand systems holistically. They care more about the work than about playing politics. But I don't have experience leading teams, or managing budgets, or... You'll learn. And you'll have support. What you can't learn is the way your mind works. She leaned forward. This morning, while everyone else was focused on obvious failure points, you were thinking about a 3-week-old memory leak in a secondary service. That's not a skill you pick up in management training. Patterson, who'd been quiet during this exchange, finally spoke up. The position comes with a team of 12 developers, a 7-figure budget, and a starting salary of $180,000. I'm pretty sure my heart stopped beating for a moment. $180,000. That was more than 3 times what I was making. It was the kind of money that meant I could pay off my student loans, get a real apartment, maybe even start thinking about the future instead of just surviving each month. There's one more thing, Rebecca said. The CEO wants to meet you. Mr. Hartwell? The other CEO. I stared at her blankly. Marcus, she said gently, Daniel Hartwell is our company's CEO. But Meridian Tech is owned by Hartwell Enterprises. The man who wants to meet you is James Hartwell, the billionaire. The room started spinning slightly. James Hartwell wasn't just wealthy, he was Forbes list wealthy. Private jet, multiple homes, the kind of rich where money stops being a number and becomes a force of nature. And he wanted to meet me. Why? I managed to ask. Rebecca smiled. Because this morning, a junior analyst saved one of his company's $400,000 in about 15 minutes. And James Hartwell didn't become a billionaire by ignoring that kind of talent. The penthouse office of James Hartwell occupied the entire top floor of the adjacent building, connected to ours by a skybridge I'd never even noticed before. As Rebecca led me across that bridge, I caught glimpses of the city sprawling out below us, and I couldn't help thinking about how different the world looked from up here. The elevator that took us to the penthouse required a special keycard and biometric scanner. Even the elevator was intimidating. Polished marble, soft classical music, and a subtle scent that probably cost more per ounce than my monthly grocery budget. Nervous? Rebecca asked as we rose toward the 40th floor. Terrified, I admitted. Good. That means you understand the magnitude of what's happening. The elevator doors opened directly into James Hartwell's office, and my first thought was that it looked more like a luxury hotel lobby than a workplace. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the entire metropolitan area. The furniture was a mix of modern and classical pieces that probably belonged in a museum. And behind a desk the size of my entire apartment sat a man who controlled more wealth than some small countries. James Hartwell was not what I'd expected. Maybe it was all the Forbes photos and business magazine covers, but I'd imagined someone more imposing, more obviously powerful. Instead, he looked like someone's favorite college professor, rumpled shirt, reading glasses perched on his nose, genuinely warm smile. The only hint of his wealth was a watch that I was pretty sure cost more than my car. Marcus Chen, he said, standing up and extending his hand. The man who saved my Tuesday. His handshake was firm but not aggressive, and his voice had a slight accent I couldn't quite place. Mr. Hartwell, it's an honor to meet you. Please, sit. Coffee. Water. I think I have some of those energy drinks somewhere if you prefer. Coffee would be great, thank you. He pressed a button on his desk, spoke briefly to someone, then settled back in his chair and studied me with curious eyes. Rebecca tells me you figured out our payment system problem in minutes. Walk me through how you think. So for the 3rd time that day, I explained the memory leak, the cascade failure, and the fix. But this time felt different. Hartwell listened with the intensity of someone who genuinely wanted to understand not just what I'd done, but how I'd approached the problem. The interesting part isn't the technical solution, he said when I finished. Any competent developer could have made that fix once they found the right code. The interesting part is that you saw a pattern 3 weeks ago that everyone else missed, and you connected it to today's crisis when everyone else was looking in the wrong places. I just pay attention to details. No, he said, leaning forward. You pay attention to systems. There's a difference. Most people see individual components, a server here, a database there, a piece of code somewhere else. You see how they all connect, how they influence each other over time. That's rare. The coffee arrived, brought by an assistant who moved like a ghost and disappeared just as quietly. It was the best coffee I'd ever tasted, probably from beans that were individually blessed by coffee monks or something equally ridiculous. Marcus, what do you know about my companies? Hartwell Enterprises owns about 40 different businesses across technology, real estate, and finance. You started with a small software company right out of college and built it into what it is today. Forbes estimates your net worth at around $3.2 billion. He smiled. You've done your homework. But do you know how I really made my money? Smart investments and good acquisitions? Pattern recognition. He stood up and walked to one of the windows. In 1998, I saw that e-commerce was going to explode, so I bought companies that handled online payments. In 2004, I realized social media was going to change everything, so I invested in companies that managed social media infrastructure. In 2008, when everyone else was panicking about the financial crisis, I saw that mobile technology was about to take off, so I bought mobile app development companies at bargain prices. He turned back to me. Every major success I've had came from seeing patterns before other people did. Connecting dots that seemed unrelated. Understanding how systems evolve over time. I was starting to get an idea of where this conversation was heading, and it made my pulse quicken. This morning, he continued, while experienced developers were looking at obvious failure points, you were thinking about a 3-week-old memory leak in a secondary system. You saw a pattern they missed, connected dots they couldn't see. That tells me you have the kind of mind I need. For the advanced systems architecture position? No, Marcus. That was Rebecca's idea, and it's a good one. But I'm thinking bigger. He sat back down and fixed me with that intense stare again. I want you to help me identify the next pattern. The next big shift that's coming in technology. My mouth went dry. I'm not sure I understand. I think you do. You've been studying systems architecture in your spare time not because you had to, but because you wanted to understand how things really work. That curiosity, that drive to see the bigger picture, that's exactly what I need. He opened a drawer in his desk and pulled out a folder. I'm creating a new division within Hartwell Enterprises. Strategic Technology Assessment. Its job will be to identify emerging technologies and market patterns before they become obvious to everyone else. I want you to head it up. The folder contained a single sheet of paper with terms that made my head spin. Not just the $300,000 starting salary, though that was hard to ignore, but the scope of the role. I'd be working directly with Hartwell's investment team, analyzing potential acquisitions, identifying technological trends, essentially helping to steer billions of dollars in investment decisions. Mr. Hartwell, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. This morning, I was a junior analyst making $52,000 a year. Now you're offering me a position this is surreal. Marcus, let me tell you something about patterns, he said, leaning back in his chair. The most important ones are usually invisible until suddenly they're not. 3 weeks ago, you noticed a small anomaly in some system logs. This morning, that anomaly helped you save my company $400,000. Tomorrow, that same pattern recognition ability might help me identify the next billion-dollar opportunity. He stood up again and extended his hand. I built my fortune by recognizing talent before other people do. By seeing potential that isn't obvious yet. By betting on people who think differently. I looked at the contract again, at the numbers that would change everything about my life. Then I looked at James Hartwell, this billionaire who was offering to bet his money on my ability to see patterns in chaos. "There's just one thing I need to know," I said. "What's that? When do I start?" 3 months later, I was sitting in my new corner office on the 35th floor, looking out at a view that still didn't feel real. The Strategic Technology Assessment Division had grown from just me to a team of 8 brilliant analysts, and we'd already identified 3 emerging technology trends that Hartwell had invested in heavily. The portfolio was up 47%. My student loans were gone. I'd moved into a downtown loft that had actual room for furniture. I drove a car that started every time I turned the key. But the biggest change wasn't in my bank account, it was in how I saw myself. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. That Tuesday afternoon, Rebecca knocked on my door with an expression I couldn't quite read. "We need to talk," she said, closing the door behind her. "If this is about the blockchain infrastructure report, I know it's aggressive, but it's not about the report." She sat down across from my desk. "Marcus, what I'm about to tell you might change how you feel about everything that's happened." Something in her tone made my chest tighten. "Okay. The payment system crisis 3 months ago? It wasn't an accident." I stared at her. "What do you mean?" "James had our security team run a full analysis after you fixed it. The memory leak you identified, it wasn't a coding error. Someone introduced it deliberately. Small enough to avoid detection, timed to trigger during peak transaction hours, designed to cause exactly the kind of cascade failure that happened." The room suddenly felt very cold. "Someone sabotaged our system?" "A competitor. We've identified 3 similar attacks on other payment processors over the past year. Same pattern, same technique. They've been systematically trying to damage confidence in smaller payment companies to drive business toward the major players." My mind was racing. But then, the fix wasn't impressive. Anyone could have found the problem if they'd known to look for deliberate sabotage instead of random errors. Rebecca smiled, not the reaction I'd expected. "Marcus, you're missing the point. Yes, anyone could have found it if they'd known it was sabotage. But you found it without knowing. You looked at a system under attack and instinctively focused on the right anomaly. While everyone else was chasing their tails, you zeroed in on the actual problem." "But I thought it was a bug." "Exactly. You saw a pattern that didn't fit, and you investigated it regardless of what you thought caused it. Do you understand how rare that is? Most people, when they're looking for a bug, only consider accidental causes. They don't think like an attacker." She leaned forward. "There's something else. James has been watching you for longer than you know." "What?" "The authentication service logs you were studying during your lunch breaks? The system documentation you'd been reading? James had IT flag any employee who accessed advanced system information outside their clearance level. You were the only one." I felt like the world was shifting under my feet. He was watching me before the crisis? For 2 months. He was curious about the junior analyst who was teaching himself advanced systems architecture. When the payment crisis hit, he was already interested in you. Your solution just confirmed what he'd suspected. So none of this was... I didn't actually... "Marcus." Rebecca's voice was firm. "Stop. You're spiraling into imposter syndrome, and it's ridiculous. James Hartwell didn't build a billion-dollar empire by making charity cases out of junior analysts. You earned every opportunity you've received." She stood up and walked to my window, looking out at the city. "Do you know how many people work across all of Hartwell's companies?" "Around 15,000. 15,000 people, Marcus. And out of all of them, when James needed someone with your particular combination of curiosity, technical insight, and pattern recognition, he chose you. Not because he felt sorry for you, not because of luck, but because you demonstrated abilities that are genuinely rare. I absorbed this slowly. But the crisis that started everything was artificial. So what? Your response wasn't artificial. Your months of self-directed learning weren't artificial. Your ability to see connections others miss isn't artificial. She turned back to me. The sabotage just created the circumstances where your real abilities became visible. There was a long pause as I tried to process everything. "There's one more thing," Rebecca said. "James wants to see you." Am I in trouble? Quite the opposite. 20 minutes later, I was back in the penthouse office where everything had changed 3 months ago. James Hartwell was standing at the same window, but this time he wasn't alone. A woman I didn't recognize was sitting at his conference table, surrounded by documents and laptops. "Marcus," James said, turning toward me, "I'd like you to meet Dr. Sarah Kim, our head of cybersecurity." "Sarah, this is the young man I've been telling you about." Dr. Kim stood and shook my hand. "The pattern recognition specialist. I've been looking forward to meeting you." "Marcus," James said, gesturing for us to sit, "we've identified 17 other companies that have been targeted by the same group that attacked our payment system. The pattern is sophisticated, but it's there once you know how to look for it. And we want your help hunting them down," Dr. Kim added. I looked between them. "You want me to help catch cyber criminals?" "We want you to do what you do best," James said. "See patterns others miss. Connect dots that seem unrelated. Help us understand not just what these attackers are doing, but how they think." He slid a folder across the table to me. "This would be in addition to your current role, not instead of it. Think of it as applying your pattern recognition skills to a different kind of system. Criminal networks instead of computer networks." I opened the folder and saw financial records, attack timelines, technical analyses, the kind of complex, interconnected data that my brain loved to sink into. "The FBI is handling the law enforcement side," Dr. Kim explained. "But they need help seeing the bigger picture. Understanding the strategic pattern behind individual attacks." I looked up at James. "Why me?" "Because 3 months ago, while everyone else was looking for obvious answers, you found the hidden one. Because you see systems the way these attackers see them, holistically, strategically, with an understanding of how small changes can have big consequences." He smiled. "Besides, you've already proven you can spot their work under pressure." As I flipped through the documents, I started seeing connections. Transaction patterns that matched our attack. Timing sequences that suggested coordination. Infrastructure choices that revealed something about the attacker's capabilities and resources. "I can see it," I said, almost to myself. "There's definitely a pattern here." "I thought you might," James said. "So what do you say? Ready to help me catch some criminals?" I closed the folder and looked at this billionaire who had changed my life, this cybersecurity expert who was trusting me with national-level security work, and the evidence of a criminal conspiracy that my weird brain was apparently uniquely suited to unravel. "When do we start?" James Hartwell smiled and pressed a button on his desk. "Agent Morrison? Please come up. We're ready to begin." As I sat there waiting to meet an FBI agent, in a billionaire's penthouse office, about to help hunt down international cybercriminals, I couldn't help but think about that Tuesday morning 3 months ago when I was just a junior analyst drinking gas station coffee and fixing printer connections. Sometimes the most extraordinary changes come from the most ordinary moments. Sometimes the patterns that change everything are invisible until someone with the right kind of mind looks at them the right way. And sometimes, just sometimes, being curious about systems you're not supposed to understand can save not just $400,000, but something much more valuable. It turns out that billionaires become billionaires by recognizing one simple truth. The most important patterns are usually hiding in plain sight, waiting for someone who knows how to look.